The season of love is upon us. Romance, angels, valentines. Unfortunately, I myself have no Valentine, and I am no love expert, so I'd like to learn a bit more about love. And for advice, I am turning to Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover needs no introduction. She's the most successful author in the world, pretty much, and she specializes in romance. So today I thought it would be fun to go through her most popular books together and see what all the fuss is about. I will be spoiling every single one of these books, so you have been warned. We'll discuss these novels and their romances, the good, the bad, and the queen of romance. That's Colleen Hoover. Let's start with her most popular novel, It Ends With Us. I just want to say up front that It Ends With Us is actually not a romance novel. This book is heavily focused on the topics of domestic violence, domestic abuse, and sexual assault, so please be aware of that before we get into the actual contents of the book. This is by far Colleen Hoover's most popular novel, and as of right now, it's the only one of her books to have received a film adaptation, which we'll talk about much later in the video. And to separate my discussion of the book from my discussion of the film, I will be using my own fan cast in this segment, and I'll be doing that for all these books, so look out for that. It Ends With Us is about Lily Blossom Bloom, a young woman living in Boston. Okay, let's get this conversation out of the way. Let's talk about these names. A lot of the characters in these books are going to have quirky, goofy names. And look, I know I have an unusual name, at least here in America, but I have an excuse. My mom is Indian, so my parents gave me an Indian name. I don't think any of these characters are in that situation. Lily is a particularly bad example because her dream is to become a florist. By the way, this video is also my informal audition to narrate Colleen Hoover's next audiobook, so I absolutely love gardening. I love flowers, plants, growing things. It's my passion. It's always been my dream to open a florist shop, but I'm afraid if I did, people wouldn't think my desire was authentic. They would think I was trying to capitalize off my name and that being a florist isn't really my dream job. I feel like that makes the opposite of sense, but I'm just gonna move on. I just started this book. She does point out how unfortunate of a name it is, but I feel like that's no excuse. She could have still had a floral themed name, like Lily Rose Depp, without being named Lily Blossom Bloom. Anyways, at the beginning of the book, Lily's father has just died. When Lily was a kid, he was physically abusive towards her mother Jenny, and while she loved him as a father, she doesn't really like or respect him as a person. At her father's funeral, Lily was asked to give a eulogy, and she began by saying she wanted to share 5 great things about her father. She then went silent and walked off, and I gotta say, that's awesome. The evening after the funeral, she's sitting alone on a rooftop patio when she meets a man named Ryle Kincaid. We are introduced to Ryle when he storms onto the rooftop and kicks the shit out of one of the patio chairs. He and Lily start talking, and we find out that he is a neurosurgeon and is super rich. He and his sister both are. She and her husband bought out the entire top floor of the building they're standing on. This is also where we see this thing Ryle and Lily like to do called naked truths, which are basically just confessions. Lily confesses that her father was abusive, and Ryle confesses that the reason he was so upset earlier is because he had to operate on a young boy who was accidentally shot by his brother, and he wasn't able to save him. Lily tells Ryle about the eulogy she gave earlier, and Ryle's next naked truth is that he wants to fuck her. So, way to pivot, Ryle. Lily says no because she's not into one-night stands, but she shares one more naked truth with him. Since we're on the subject, the first guy I ever had sex with was homeless. I'm only bringing this up because it ends up being really important later. Ryle has one more naked truth. He is not at all interested in marriage or having children. And after this conversation, Ryle and Lily part ways. A lot of this book consists of Lily reading through diary entries she wrote when she was 15, and for reasons I do not understand, she chose to format all of her diary entries as though they were letters to Ellen DeGeneres.
Shorty right there, she's got everything I need.
I have to give Hoover kind of a pass here because she wrote this book years before Ellen's fall from grace, but still, why would you do this? A lot of the things Lily writes about are very serious, and the fact that it's being written to Ellen is just so stupid. I have to say though, some of these diary entries can be kind of funny. I saw your interview with the presidential candidate Barack Obama today. Man, so much has happened to both of us. You just interviewed someone who might be our next president, and I'm feeding a homeless boy.
It's not fair. You just married Scarlett Johansson, and I just bought an electric bike. We're both doing equally great.
I guess I should elaborate on that last part. There is an abandoned house behind Lily's backyard, and a boy named Atlas, who goes to Lily's school, has been staying there. So Lily starts bringing him food, and she gets kind of a crush on him. His voice gave me chills, Ellen. Has a boy's voice ever done that to you? Oh, wait, sorry. Has a girl's voice ever done that to you? I love that. She's an ally. Lily and Atlas fall in love and start dating. They watch Ellen together all the time. Lily is 15 and Atlas is 18, which I feel like there was no reason they couldn't have been the same age. Atlas eventually leaves for Boston, and Lily hasn't seen or spoken to Atlas since he left. She eventually opens up the flower shop of her dreams, where she sells steampunk bouquets. One of the employees at this flower shop is a woman named Alyssa, who is actually Ryle's sister. Remember, she bought out the top floor of that building, and over time, Alyssa and Lily become best friends. And after her business takes off, she reconnects with Ryle and they start dating. So Lily is very closely tied to the Kincaid family. Alyssa is married to Marshall, who isn't really that important. He's just kind of a goofy guy, hence the casting. There's actually a really weird plotline where Marshall has an affair with a cardboard cutout of Atlas. Wait, no, sorry. I must be thinking of something else. One day, Ryle meets Lily and her mother at a restaurant called Bibbs, and their waiter, the owner of the restaurant, is none other than Atlas. Lily and Ryle's relationship is going really well until one night when they're cooking together and Ryle burns his hand. The casserole falls from his hand and lands on the floor, shattering everywhere. I start laughing as soon as I realize he didn't even think to use a pot holder. I'm instantly not laughing anymore. I'm on the floor, my hand pressed against the corner of my eye. In a matter of 1 second, Ryle's arm came out of nowhere and slammed against me, knocking me backward. This is the big turning point of the book. This is where it shifts from being about Lily and Ryle's romance to being about Ryle's abuse. After this instance, Lily is of course reminded of her parents, but she decides that she and Ryle are different. She accepts Ryle's apology, but she warns him that if he hurts her again, she will leave him. Later on, Lily, Ryle, Alyssa, and Marshall are all eating at Bibbs again when Atlas, while serving them, notices the cut on Lily's eye and the bandage on Ryle's hand. He confronts Lily one-on-one in the bathroom and tells her to leave Ryle. After their confrontation, Ryle sees Lily and Atlas leaving the bathroom together and assumes the worst. He assumes Lily was doing some Paula Cracker type behavior. Ryle and Atlas get into a huge fight and Ryle gets kicked out of the restaurant. Atlas visits Lily at her flower shop and apologizes, but he also writes his phone number on a slip of paper and puts it inside Lily's phone case in case she ever needs it. Ryle and Lily decide to get married in Vegas. It's a very spur-of-the-moment thing. "Naked truth," he whispers. "I'm so excited to be your husband, I could piss my damn pants." If I had to read that, so do you. Their marriage is actually pretty steady until Ryle finds Atlas's number in Lily's phone. He loses his temper, breaks her phone, and pushes her down the stairs. When Alyssa sees Lily, she instantly knows what happened, and she asks Lily to let Ryle talk to her. "Hear him out," she begs. "I'm not asking you to forgive him, because I have no idea what happened last night. But just please, as my sister-in-law and my best friend, give my brother a chance to talk to you." I've got to be honest, I really dislike the character of Alyssa. I just can't imagine asking a victim to be in the same room with their abuser, let alone hear them out. It's clear that Alyssa knows what her brother is like, but she doesn't make any effort to tell Lily, her best friend, that Ryle is abusive. I have a brother. I love him more than anything. He's one of my favorite people on the entire planet. If I found out he was doing what Ryle is doing and had a history of that behavior, I would never encourage his partner to hear him out or do anything other than cut him off. I would cut him off if that was the type of person he was. I have no doubt people like Alyssa do exist, but I don't feel like the narrative really frames her actions as wrong, which in my opinion, they are. But Lily does hear Ryle out, and he explains that when he and Alyssa were kids, they had another sibling named Emerson, who died after Ryle accidentally shot him, just like the young boy at the beginning of the book. Ryle has had anger issues ever since he lost his brother, but he tells Lily that that does not excuse his actions. She forgives him and promises to help him work through this together. By the way, about halfway through the book, Alyssa does end up getting pregnant, so she and Marshall are now expecting their first child. She gives birth to a baby girl, and she and Marshall choose to name her Riley, after Ryle, because they think the world of him. Again, if I knew my brother was an abuser, I maybe wouldn't name my daughter after him. Later that night, Lily comes home to find that Ryle has been drinking and he's been reading through her Ellen diaries. And I'm not going to read it verbatim, but Ryle bites her shoulder and tries to rape her. That night, Lily calls Atlas and asks him for help, and when he takes her to the hospital, she finds out that she's pregnant. Now staying with Atlas, Lily writes another letter to Ellen where she talks about being able to understand and empathize with her mother and her concern for her child's future. To grow up in a broken home or an abusive one. I've already failed this baby in life and have only known about his or her existence for a single day. In this book, Lily never considers any other option than keeping her abuser's baby and co-parenting it with him. Not only does that keep Lily in close proximity to Ryle, but it also puts her child in potential danger. She has no reason to believe he won't also abuse their child. Even though she is extremely unhappy about her pregnancy and she does not want to bring a child into her current situation, she's already accepted that she has to have this baby as though she has no other choice. I don't know, I just think that's really interesting. Alyssa eventually figures out that Lily and Ryle haven't been speaking, and Lily tells her the full story. As his sister, I wish more than anything that you could find a way to forgive him. But as your best friend, I have to tell you that if you take him back, I will never speak to you again. I am glad that Alyssa is telling Lily not to take Ryle back, but she was in a position where she could have prevented them from ever even dating, so I feel like it's too little too late. Lily and Ryle meet up again, and Ryle sees that Lily is pregnant. He begs her to forgive him, but she refuses. Lily decides to confide in her mother, and her mother tells her to leave Ryle and avoid making the mistakes she did. Lily also gives birth to a baby girl, and she decides to name her Emerson after Ryle's late brother. She also asks Ryle for a divorce. What would you do if one of these days this little girl looked up at you and she said, "Daddy, my boyfriend hit me"? What would you say to her, Ryle? Tell me. I need to know what you would say to our daughter if the man she loves with all her heart ever hurts her. A sob breaks from his chest. I would beg her to leave him. I know this is a big emotional moment, but I can't get over the fact that she said all of this to the man with uncontrollable rage issues while he was holding their newborn daughter. Ryle leaves and the relationship is officially over. My mother went through it. I went through it. I'll be damned if I allow my daughter to go through it. I kiss her on the forehead and make her a promise. It stops here, with me and you. It ends with us. I've got to say, I know it's corny, but I love a title drop, and this is a pretty good one. That's pretty much the end of the book. There's an epilogue where we see Lily co-parenting with Ryle and still very close with Alyssa. She also reconnects with Atlas and tells him she's ready to be with him. She also tells him that Emerson's middle name is Dory. So that was It Ends With Us. There is a sequel. It starts with us, about Atlas and Lily's relationship. I did not read it. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this book. On one hand, I appreciate the way Hoover tries to explore the thought process of a victim of domestic abuse and the logic of why they would choose to stay in that situation. However, in my opinion, a lot of the novel lacks nuance and the characters feel a bit one-dimensional. The goofiness of certain parts of the book also really undermines the message for me. When you read 15-year-old Lily's description of her father abusing her mother, it is very sad and tragic, but then you read the sentence, "He was choking her, Ellen," and it completely ruins the emotional impact of the scene. Hoover could have easily still used the diaries as a way to reveal information about Lily's past. I just think the tone of the book would be much more consistent if she had just not included the Ellen of it all. And that's how Sahana sees it. Honestly, one of the biggest issues with It Ends With Us is just the way it was marketed. It was labeled as a romance, which it really isn't, and I would have been completely blindsided if I hadn't already known what the book was about. There was also a coloring book that was canceled after Backlash, and I completely see why. I don't know why anyone thought releasing a coloring book based on a book about domestic abuse was ever a good idea. I don't want to say definitively if It Ends With Us is a good or bad portrayal of domestic violence because I really just don't know. I don't think it's my place to say, and I would really be interested in hearing what you think. I do know Colleen Hoover based this book off her own experience with her parents, and because of the book's subject matter and its popularity, I can easily see how it could be a source of comfort or motivation for readers who are in a similar situation to Lily. I can see how it could be a source of comfort for Colleen Hoover, and I do think that's a good thing, even if I personally think the book is poorly written. I rate It Ends With Us a 6 out of 10. Layla. So I've got to be honest, I'm a little confused by the romance in Layla. Nothing about it feels at all romantic to me, but clearly I am not the expert. And Layla is a supernatural romance. There are ghosts in this one. This book is the only Colleen Hoover book I've read that is told solely from the perspective of a male protagonist. The male in question is Leeds Gabriel, who I found to be kind of awful. Leeds is a musician, and the book opens with him and his band performing at a wedding at a bed and breakfast. Who should play Leeds? I need someone who can play bass, who is strangely charming yet deeply repulsive. Got it! While on stage, Leeds notices a woman dancing in the crowd. Whatever the reason for her flailing around like a dehydrated fish, I'm thankful for it. It's the most entertaining thing to happen during a show in a while. Oh, I can't do a Murdoch impression. After the band is done performing, Leeds finds the woman in the pool and she introduces herself as Layla. I'm assuming Layla is supposed to be named after the song, which I actually don't think is that corny. I personally plan on naming my child after a song. If it's a girl, she'll be named Glitter Freeze, and if it's a boy, he'll be named Honky Cat as performed by Taron Egerton and Richard Madden for the Academy Award-winning motion picture Rocket Man. We'll call him Honk for short. Layla's sister, Aspen, is the bride at this wedding. She's marrying a man named Chad Kyle, and Leeds and Layla both make fun of his name. I'm not really sure how Chad Kyle is any worse of a name than Leeds Gabriel. Aspen gives Layla and Leeds both a small white pill, and Leeds is instantly high. I don't know what kind of drug she gave me, probably Molly or some other kind of upper, because it's kicking in fast. Aspen gives it to me every time I drink too much. It's called aspirin. The confusion on my face makes her grin. Did you think you were high? Oh my god, that's so embarrassing. If I had done and said all that in front of a pretty girl, she would have never seen me again. I would have drowned myself in that pool, like, for my next trick! Wait, that was kind of good. I think I just redeemed myself from that horrible Murdoch impression. They go inside and Leeds plays Layla a song on the piano. I don't really know much about songwriting or making music in general, but I feel like these lyrics are bad. I have no idea how this song is supposed to be performed, and I was wondering if it was even possible to turn these lyrics into a real song. So I tried it.
That night I stopped believing in heaven. I couldn't believe in a God that cruel. Could you? That night I stopped praying on my knees. But I don't pray standing either. Do you? That night I closed the door and closed the window. I've been sitting in the dark. Are you? That night I learned happiness is a fairy tale of 1,000 pages read aloud by you. That night I stopped believing in God. You were ours, he didn't care. He took you, so that night I just stopped that night. I stopped.
Yeah, no, it's still bad. Leeds and Layla have sex, Layla is drunk and Leeds is not, so and this is the first of many sex scenes in these books. It ends with us had them too, but it just didn't feel like the right time to talk about it. I don't love the way these sex scenes are written, I just find them to be very cringy. And like, you can put sex in your book, like, it's fine. I've read some fan fictions in my day. I've read some books, and I've read some magazines about those high-class ladies down in New Orleans and all the fools. I just dislike the way these scenes are written, but what do I know? The entire time Leeds is hanging out with Layla, he's going on and on about how different and quirky Layla is. I'd kill for a taco right now, she says. I've never wanted inside a girl's mind more than I want inside Layla's. Her mind doesn't work like other minds work. Chill the fuck out, man. She just said she wanted a taco. Layla encourages Leeds to start posting his music online, and he starts gaining some traction. He posts a picture of himself and Layla on his Instagram, which upsets a lot of his female fans. We find out that Leeds has an ex-girlfriend named Sable, who also saw the Instagram post. Sable, somehow, was running a fan club for him a year before they even met. After he broke it off with her, she kept calling and showing up to gigs, and all his friends started calling her Unstable Sable. Now, I myself am no stranger to a celebrity crush. Taron Egerton, Andrew Sawicki, United States Senator John Ossoff, Georgians, you know what I'm talking about. Have you seen that photo of him eating pecans outside of Buc-ee's? Sorry, my point is, this behavior feels a bit extreme, especially when Sable shows up at their door and shoots Layla in the head. Leeds eats Layla's hair. I don't know. Layla is now out of the hospital. She did survive, but is still recovering. They decide to go back to the bed and breakfast where they met as kind of a fresh start, but Layla starts acting strange. She starts having panic attacks, she seems very disoriented, and she doesn't remember a lot of the experiences and conversations she had with Leeds. Strange things start happening at the bed and breakfast too. In addition to Layla clearly struggling mentally, she starts developing an eating disorder. She either eats very restrictively or she eats very quickly and obsessively and then acts like she has no idea that she's even eaten anything. Remember how I said this book is a supernatural romance? Well, that's because the reason all of these strange things have been happening around the bed and breakfast is because it's haunted by a ghost. Her name is Willow, and she begins possessing Layla's body when she falls asleep so she can talk to Leeds. This is why Layla's been eating the way she has. Willow is unable to eat, so she uses Layla's body to eat as much as she likes, like Carrie in that one episode of The Amazing World of Gumball. She has access to Layla's memories, but only when she's attached to her body, and she chooses not to delve into them too deeply because that would be crossing a line. As Willow and Leeds keep talking, Leeds finds himself falling for Willow. In fact, he wants to spend time with Willow so badly that he tries to drug Layla so she'll fall asleep. I open the lid to the Ambien, shake one into my hand, and then put the bottle back in the dresser. It's not like she doesn't take them on her own every night anyway. I'm just accelerating the process. I use the back of a spoon to crush the pill up on the counter. I scoop up the powder and mix it into the wine glass until it's completely dissolved. The glass is knocked from my grip and shatters against the kitchen floor, several feet away from me. Willow saw what I was doing, and it obviously upset her. I leave the kitchen and head back upstairs, embarrassed that Willow saw that. Leeds also starts talking to a ghost detective on an online forum about his communication with Willow. In order to hide the fact that he's been letting a ghost possess Layla's body, Leeds starts lying about the things he and Willow did when Layla was asleep. And because Layla's body isn't getting any rest, and because she has no idea what's going on, she's getting more and more anxious and distrustful of Leeds. At this point, Leeds' relationship with Willow is a full-blown emotional affair. Remember, Leeds and Layla are still technically on vacation at the bed and breakfast, and now Leeds wants to buy it so he has an excuse to keep seeing Willow. Layla did agree to give me a few more days in the house, but we'll still eventually have to leave. Willow will be alone. It's not like I can just come visit her. This place is in the middle of nowhere. Even if Layla doesn't want to live here, I would hate for someone else to buy it. And if I owned this place, it would give me an excuse to come back occasionally, to visit Willow without Layla growing suspicious. Willow and I have grown comfortable with one another, to the point that I'm starting to prefer her company over Layla's. Even when he and Layla have sex, he's thinking of Willow. Leeds had been planning to propose to Layla, but now he no longer wants to. But Layla finds the ring, and Leeds feels backed into a corner, so he proposes, even though he is no longer in love with her. He and Willow later have a conversation about his relationship with Layla. "Do you not enjoy being with her?" she asks. "I used to. Sometimes I wonder, if I would have met her today, how she is now, would I have fallen in love with her as easily as I fell in love with her in the beginning? Part of me thinks maybe I wouldn't be able to fall in love with this version of her at all." Leeds and Willow kiss, they hold hands, and the next morning, Layla finds out that Leeds was planning to buy the bed and breakfast where she doesn't want to live, and he didn't consult her about this at all. She threatens to leave him, and he refuses to let her because, if she leaves, he won't be able to see Willow anymore. Leeds has still been talking to the ghost detective I mentioned earlier, and he agrees to come to the bed and breakfast to help them. Now, Leeds knows that Layla is completely in the dark about the entire situation, and she also will not stay at the bed and breakfast willingly. So what does he do? He ties her to the bed and holds her captive so Willow can possess her and talk to the ghost detective. As it turns out, this ghost detective is also a ghost, just like Willow, and he's possessing the body of some random guy so he can communicate with Leeds. He interviews Leeds about his history with Layla and then Willow, and the excerpts from this interview are dispersed throughout the entire book. And here's where we get to the big twist, and it's kind of confusing, so I need you to stick with me. After Sable shot Layla, Leeds shot and killed Sable. When both women were shot, their souls left their body. Sable's soul entered Layla's body, and because Sable was already dead, Layla's soul went out into the ether. So Layla is actually Sable, and Willow is actually Layla. That's why there are gaps in Layla's memory, because Sable never had those memories. That's why she was so anxious and had an eating disorder. Those were all symptoms of Sable's mental illnesses. And that's why Leeds fell in love with Willow, because she was actually Layla the whole time. Ghost Detective is like, okay, great, we figured it out, and he leaves. So it's up to Leeds and Layla to figure out how to switch the souls, and the only way to do that is to kill Sable. Again. So here's what they decide to do. When Sable is still inside Layla's body, Leeds is going to drown her in the pool and stage it to look like a suicide. They even call up Layla's sister Aspen because Aspen is a nurse and will be able to perform CPR and bring Layla back to life. Somehow, their bonkers plan works and Layla's soul is permanently back in her body, whereas Sable is sent to the spirit realm, I guess. Layla and Leeds are reunited, they're in love, everything Leeds did over the course of this book is forgiven. The book ends with Layla and Leeds buying a house together in Montana and starting their life together. Great! I think the concept of this book was solid, but it really just fell flat for me. I had a few issues with the way the story was executed. First of all, I don't really like how Leeds is still presented as a hero after everything he did. Even if he was trying to do the right thing, I just don't think there's any justification for treating Layla the way he did, even if she was actually Sable. Even when he still thought she was Layla, he just wasn't a good boyfriend. Also, Leeds started losing interest in Layla when she started showing signs of trauma and mental illness. It doesn't actually feel like he loves Layla, he loves the manic pixie dream girl he imagines her to be. And that's not even mentioning the emotional cheating. We're supposed to forgive Leeds because he was really falling in love with Layla, but he was fully under the impression that he was talking to someone else. That's still cheating. He absolutely used Layla, or who he thought was Layla, for his own gain. I just found Leeds to be very unlikable, and it was very difficult for me to sympathize with him. I also took issue with the flippant way Hoover writes about eating disorders and brain injuries. First of all, we're told Sable was bulimic when her behavior seems much more in line with anorexia. That just seems like a very easy thing to research and correct. Like, if you're gonna write about things like this, do it properly, you know? I also feel like the book was written in a way that was very dismissive of Layla's injury. I was kind of under the impression that surviving a shot to the head would result in some kind of permanent brain damage, but that is not the case here. Layla's totally fine, she was just possessed. She doesn't have PTSD, she just has false memories from a different soul. I don't know, I just didn't care for this book, and I found a lot of the romance hard to justify. But, again, what do I know? I rate Layla a 4 out of 10.
Verity.
Okay, so Verity is also not a straight-up romance, but all of these books have an element of romance regardless. Verity is a thriller, and I like thrillers. Maybe I didn't love the way the romance was handled in Layla, but I'm keeping my hopes up. People love these books for a reason, right? Verity begins with a man's head being crushed by a truck. This part of the book takes place in New York City, and the way Colleen Hoover writes about city folk is so funny. People gasp, but no one screams. Here in Manhattan, a pedestrian struck by a vehicle happens so often, it's not much more than an inconvenience. Even Lowen Ashley, and yes, Ashley is her last name, just watched a man get brutally killed, and her only response is, "Oh man, I got blood all over my shirt." After witnessing this man's tragic death, Lowen meets a man named Jeremy Crawford, who takes her to a coffee shop bathroom, locks them both in, and gives her his shirt to wear, given hers is covered in blood. Oh, I love a meet cute. In true Colleen Hoover fashion, Lowen and Jeremy start sharing deeply personal facts about themselves despite only having met 5 minutes ago. First of all, Jeremy's eyes are apparently chartreuse, which is horrifying. He shares with Lowen that 8 months ago he pulled his 8-year-old daughter's body out of a lake. After their conversation, Lowen leaves the bathroom and makes her way to a meeting, but as luck would have it, she soon finds out that her meeting is with none other than Jeremy. Lowen is a writer, and so is Jeremy's wife, Verity Crawford, whose books are wildly popular. However, Verity was recently in a car accident, so she's unable to finish her current series, and Lowen is being asked to take over. She's hesitant, but Jeremy encourages her to accept the offer, and she adopts the pen name Laura Chase. She also chooses to drive to Vermont and live in the Crawford home so she has access to all of Verity's manuscripts. I could have chosen anything else to do on this 6-hour drive. I could have listened to Bohemian Rhapsody over 60 times. Sorry, you know I had to include that bit. The Crawfords live in a huge mansion in the middle of the woods near a lake, the very same lake their daughter drowned in. Lowen does some research and finds out they had also lost their other daughter when she had an allergic reaction at a sleepover. They have one surviving child, a 5-year-old son named Crew, which I think is the name of one of Chip and Joanna Gaines's kids. Colleen Hoover seems like the type to watch a lot of Fixer Upper. I'm only a few feet behind him when he opens the front door and walks into the house, then closes the door in my face. I don't want to call him an asshole. He's a little kid, and he's been through a lot. But I think he might be an asshole. Lowen got here 12 seconds ago and she's already beefing with a 5-year-old. Jeremy gives Lowen the master bedroom to sleep in, and she notices something about the bed. My eyes are pulled to the headboard, specifically to the teeth marks bitten into the top edge of the headboard in the center of the bed. Just so you know, every single character in this book is a freak. Jeremy takes Lowen upstairs to introduce her to Verity. Verity's eyes are vacant, uninterested in her surroundings, unaware of me, of Crew, of Jeremy as he leans over and brushes hair from her forehead. Verity is not conscious of her surroundings, she can't move, and she can't speak. That night, Lowen is in Verity's office, sifting through all of her work, when she finds a manuscript titled So Be It. When she starts reading it, she realizes it's Verity's autobiography. I sometimes think back on the night I met Jeremy and wonder, had we not made eye contact, would my life still end the same? Her autobiography starts with the day she met her husband. Verity writes about how she met Jeremy at a charity event. She was wearing a red dress she stole from Macy's, and the way she writes about this dress is insane. The mistake women make when they choose their clothes for events like the one I was at is that they don't think about them from the man's perspective. They aren't admiring the way it hugs the hips, or the cinch at the waist, or the fancy tie up the back. They're sizing up how easy it will be to remove. That's right, ladies. Before you get dressed, you need to ask yourself, what would a man think of my outfit? At the bar, Verity tries ordering another drink, but Jeremy tells the bartender to only serve her water for the rest of the night, because if she keeps drinking, he won't feel comfortable asking her to come home with him. Verity is annoyed at first, but she goes along with it because Jeremy's really hot, hence the casting. She decides to leave with him, and they go to Steak and Shake. I'm so sorry. Took me to a Steak and Shake, and we sat on the same side of the booth, eating French fries and sipping chocolate shakes between kisses. The restaurant was mostly empty, so we were in a quiet corner booth, far enough away that no one noticed when Jeremy's hand slid up my thigh and disappeared between my legs. There's a lot wrong with this. First of all, Steak and Shake? Be better. Second of all, Jeremy's eating french fries, so he's got greasy, salty fingers. He's gonna give Verity an infection. Third of all, someone's gonna have to clean that booth, you know. They go back to Jeremy's place, they sleep together, they're in love now. They stay in his apartment for 3 days, doing nothing but ordering takeout and fucking, which sounds musty and disgusting to me, but again, I am not an expert in these things. After dating for a few months, Jeremy proposes to Verity, and she's never been happier. In the present, Lowen becomes very fascinated by this manuscript, partially because she's morbidly curious about Verity and the loss of her and Jeremy's daughters, and partially because a lot of the manuscript is about sex with Jeremy, and she's really into it. Reading this manuscript also changes the way Lowen perceives both Jeremy and Verity, and the way she starts thinking of Verity is kind of fucked up. It's as if she were an egg, cracked open and poured out, and all that's left are the tiny fragments of hard shell. I can't help but wonder how Jeremy is handling all this. It's disappointing, knowing this is his life now, caring for an eggshell with no yolk. I feel like it would have been better for everyone if she hadn't survived the wreck. One day, Jeremy and crew are outside working on the dock near the lake, and Lowen is staring at them through the window because Jeremy's got his shirt off, but she notices crew waving at Verity's bedroom window, and Lowen begins to grow suspicious. What if Verity has been conscious and moving around this entire time? Back in the manuscript, Verity is now pregnant with twin girls, and she does not want to be. Jeremy is thrilled and cannot wait to be a father, but she does not want to be a mother, and she especially hates the fact that her unborn children are already drawing Jeremy's attention away from her. One night, Jeremy tells Verity that even though they're not born yet, he does love their daughters more than her. And after hearing him say this, Verity goes to the bathroom and attempts to give herself an abortion. After reading this part of the manuscript, Lowen is unsettled and decides to put it down for a couple of days. She's been spending more and more time with Jeremy, falling for him more and more, and one day they go to Target together and run into two of Verity's friends. Laura, this is Patricia and Caroline. Verity must be feeling better if she's got a friend in town. She looks at Jeremy for more explanation. Or, is Laura your friend? After seeing Jeremy and Lowen together, Caroline and especially Patricia are suspicious of their relationship. Do not forget about Patricia. She's coming back later. Back at the house, Lowen hears Crew scream from Verity's room and runs in to find him with a cut on his chin and a knife next to him. Did you cut yourself with a knife? Crew is wide-eyed, looking up at me. He shakes his head, probably trying to hide that he had a knife. Mommy said I'm not supposed to touch her knife. I freeze. Your mommy says that? Crew doesn't respond. Crew, I say, grabbing a washcloth, does your mommy talk to you? Even if there are parts of this book I dislike, which I'll unpack at the end of this segment, I do think the suspenseful parts of the book are written quite well. After this incident, Lowen decides to keep reading Verity's manuscript. All of Verity's attempts to end her pregnancy were unsuccessful, and the twin girls, Harper and Chasten, are born. Verity feels disgusted by these children and already hates being a mother. Her resentment of her daughters starts to drive a wedge between her and Jeremy. Chasten has a scar on her cheek, and Harper was diagnosed with autism when she was 3, which Colleen Hoover insists on calling Asperger's. After the girls are born, Jeremy goes back to work and Verity stays home to write and raise the kids, and she is horrified to be alone with them all day, so she does everything she can to make herself seem like a good mother. I would wake up with him so he could see me caring for the girls. After he was gone, I would put them back in their cribs, unplug their monitors, and go back to bed. But before Jeremy would come home, I'd feed them, bathe them, and start on dinner. Verity has a dream one night where Harper smothers Chasten with a pillow. This makes her start feeling affectionate and motherly towards Chasten, and she starts hating Harper even more. When she hears Harper crying and goes to check on her, she becomes convinced that the only way to protect Chasten is to kill Harper. So she tries to suffocate Harper by sticking her finger down her throat and almost succeeds until Jeremy comes into the room. Lowen is, of course, extremely disturbed after reading about Verity trying to murder her own daughter. But then Jeremy makes her tacos and margaritas and she's fine again. They keep talking and bonding, and after they say goodnight, Lowen says this. I cozy up in the bed with the chapter I brought with me. Jeremy made me feel so good just now, I don't even mind being a little disturbed by his wife before I fall asleep. In this chapter of the manuscript, Jeremy has begun to notice Verity's favoritism of Chasten and is furious with her. And because Jeremy is still mad at her, she lies to him and tells him she's pregnant again. If there was one good thing the girls brought to our life, it was that Jeremy seemed to love me the most when I was pregnant. There was a small part of me that was concerned about faking the pregnancy, but I knew I had options if I didn't get pregnant that week. Miscarriages were just as easy to fake as pregnancies. Back in the present, it's Lowen's birthday, and she and Jeremy do that whole "you've got something on your lip" thing. They kiss, they start making out and messing around at the bottom of the stairs. I lift my head to watch him, but my blood runs cold when my eyes are pulled to the figure standing at the top of the stairs. Verity's fists clench at her sides before she rushes back in the direction of her room. Verity, I say, breathless. He lifts up onto his arms, confused. Verity, I say again, but with more urgency. They run upstairs to find Verity asleep in her bed, but Lowen is thoroughly spooked, so to calm down, she reads another chapter of Verity's manuscript. Verity has already given birth to Crew. Apparently his name is Crew because he was conceived in a canoe and Verity wanted a nautical name. Everything is going great for Verity until she and Jeremy get a phone call. Harper and Chasten were sleeping over at a friend's house when Chasten had an allergic reaction and passed away in the middle of the night. Even though her death was just a really tragic accident, Verity is convinced it was Harper's fault and regrets not killing her beforehand. Jeremy and Lowen kiss again, they have sex, and remember the bite marks on the headboard? I bite down on the wood in front of me. I can feel Verity's teeth marks beneath mine, different, unaligned with my own, determined to think only of Jeremy and me every time I look at this headboard in the future. As Lowen keeps reading Verity's manuscript, she contemplates showing it to Jeremy, which I would have done way sooner. I would have 1,000% finished the manuscript the night I started reading it. In this chapter of the manuscript, we find out how exactly Harper drowned. Verity takes Harper and Crew out on the lake in their canoe. She tells Crew to hold his breath and tips the canoe over. Crew knows that Harper can't swim, so Verity sends him back to the house to tell Jeremy to call 911. By the time Jeremy and the ambulance arrive, Harper has already drowned. Jeremy didn't ask me what had happened. He didn't look at me at all. His reaction wasn't quite what I had planned, but I realized he was in shock. He'd adjust. He just needed time. Lowen still doesn't tell Jeremy about the manuscript. They're still sleeping together even though Jeremy is married. I can't help but notice that just like in Layla, Verity's condition is used as kind of an excuse for Jeremy to cheat on her with Lowen. I'm going to read you this next paragraph, and when I do, I want you to keep in mind that Lowen and Jeremy have known each other for about a month. I pull the pillow off my face and I place it under my hips, lifting them so that everything he just left inside me doesn't seep out. The next day, Lowen starts asking Crew about what happened in the canoe. Crew, I say, scooting closer to him, placing a gentle hand on his knee. Why did the boat tip over? Mommy said I shouldn't talk to you if you ask me questions about her. Again, I don't think this book is that well written overall, but scenes like this are pretty good. We're coming up on the end of the book. Lowen finally finishes this goddamn manuscript. I don't know how my life will end. Or maybe it won't end at all. Maybe Jeremy will wake up tomorrow and see me sleeping next to him. Or maybe he'll wake up convinced that Harper's death was not an accident. If that's the case, so be it. I'll just drive my car into a tree. Lowen finally catches Verity moving and finally gives Jeremy the manuscript. She begs him to read it, and after he does, he forces Verity to talk to him and tell him the truth. There's a brief struggle, and Jeremy and Lowen decide together to kill Verity the same way she tried to kill Harper. Jeremy sticks his fingers down her throat, and she suffocates. After Verity's death, Lowen continues writing her series, and she and Jeremy now have a newborn daughter. They're still in love, and they're all one big happy family. But Colleen Hoover has another plot twist for us, and it's bonkers bananas. When looking through Verity's old room, Lowen finds a letter she wrote to Jeremy. In this letter, Verity reveals that the entire manuscript was a writing exercise where she wrote about real events in her life and twisted them to sound as evil as possible. I was using artistic freedom to further the plot. It's an insult that you believe I would speak to one of our children that way. It's an insult that you believe any of that manuscript, or that I was capable of harming them. And according to this letter, Jeremy had read the manuscript before he and Lowen had even met. If you'd given me 5 seconds, just 5 seconds to explain, I could have saved us. I woke up in the passenger seat of my Range Rover and you were behind the wheel. There was tape on my mouth and my hands and feet were bound together. Again, I just wanted to explain that what you read wasn't true, but I couldn't talk. I looked down and realized I didn't have on a seatbelt. And in that moment, I knew what you were doing. You were going to kill me and make my death look like an accident. I had unknowingly written my own death in the last 2 sentences of my manuscript. Your plan didn't quite work out, though. I'm not sure I'm relieved that it failed. It's been tough, Jeremy. Knowing you believed my words more than you believed my actions over the course of our marriage. Knowing I've had to resort to this level of deceit to save myself from being convicted of one of the most atrocious things a mother could do. Knowing you're falling in love with another woman while I spend day after day pretending to be unaware of what our lives have turned into. Lowen decides that she can never let Jeremy see this letter. She flushes parts of it down the toilet, she eats some of the pages. She doesn't want Jeremy to have to deal with the pain of knowing he killed his innocent wife, but now she doesn't know who to believe. And that's the end of the book. Except it's not. There is a bonus chapter that is absolutely nuts. Jeremy and Lowen are happy together with their newborn daughter Nova, but Lowen feels insecure in her relationship to Jeremy. Since they got together, she finds herself constantly comparing herself to Verity, so Lowen, naturally, lets Jeremy breastfeed. I wish that was the nuttiest part, but it's not even close. Lowen and Jeremy have also been facing judgment for getting into a relationship and having a child so soon after Verity's death. They know Nova's existence is proof of their affair, so they keep their lives as private as they can. Lowen and Jeremy take Crew and Nova to the beach, and they run into Patricia, one of Verity's friends from earlier in the book. She sees Nova and starts putting 2 and 2 together, so Jeremy, naturally, drowns her. Lowen is once again complicit in this murder and now fears becoming his next victim. So that was crazy, but I think Verity might be my favorite of these books so far, bonus chapter not included. Like, I didn't think it was good, but I was kind of on the edge of my seat. It wasn't without its flaws, though. There were several parts of the book that I found to be very ableist. There was the way Lowen talked about Verity, saying she would be better off dead than in her current state. In Verity's manuscript, her perception and hatred of her daughter Harper was largely because of her autism. And if you choose to believe that what Verity wrote in her manuscript was true, she herself was clearly struggling with some kind of mental illness. She was unfit to be a mother from the beginning, and just like in It Ends With Us, she has no other option than giving birth to and raising these children she didn't want and should not have been caring for. I don't really see why Verity was treated as more of a villain than Jeremy. Verity is a murderer, allegedly, but so is Jeremy. In the majority of these books, Colleen Hoover seems unwilling to make her male characters the villain, and I just think that's really interesting. None of these characters are good people, and I just wish the book had owned that a little more. The ambiguity of the ending really didn't work for me. In my opinion, it just made everything so much more muddled and confusing. I know I'm supposed to draw my own conclusions, but it left me wondering what the point of everything was. At the end of this book, Lowen is trapped in a house with a murderer and has just had his child. That's terrifying! I think if Hoover had gone harder on the thriller aspects of the book and eased up on the romance, this book would have been way better. I feel like if Verity was to be made into a movie, that movie would be written and directed by Sam Levinson, and that's really not a compliment. I've also heard that Verity is just a worse version of the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I have not read this book, but I would still probably recommend it over Verity. I rate Verity a 5 out of 10.
Ugly love.
Ugly Love is the first true romance novel in this video, so even though I was a little thrown off by the relationships in the previous books, I'm looking forward to learning about love and what makes it so ugly. Ugly Love is about a woman named Tate Collins who's moving into her brother Corbin's apartment. When she gets there, there's a drunk guy laying in the hallway outside, and on her way into the apartment, he grabs her ankle. "Oh, I love a meet cute." She calls Corbin, and he realizes the drunk guy is Miles, their neighbor. He and Corbin are friends and are also pilots. There are a lot of pilots in this book. Pretty much every male character in Ugly Love is a pilot. I'm going to stop using that clip. I know you're going to get sick of it. Corbin asks Tate to let Miles crash on their couch, which is nuts. I don't care if he's your best friend in the whole wide world. He's wasted and you're letting him in your apartment alone with your sister? Tate gets Miles onto the couch and he starts sobbing and calls her Rachel. I have no idea who Rachel is or what he did to her, but if he's hurting this bad, I shudder to think what she's feeling. I'm tempted to find his phone and search for her name and call her so she can come rectify this. Are you nuts? Mind your own business. We get introduced to more of Miles and Corbin's pilot friends. There's Ian, who went to school with Miles, and there's Dylan, who keeps flirting with Tate even though he's married. There's also Cap, this old-ass man who works in the apartment building. Tate is a nurse and is working on her master's, and she's very serious about her career. I lived with my most recent boyfriend for more than a year before we realized we wanted two separate things out of life. He wanted me home, I wanted a career. Miles starts letting her study at his apartment when she needs peace and quiet, and she starts doing his dirty dishes, drinking his juice. Tate is totally into Miles now, and they work out a deal. Miles is attracted to her, but doesn't want to date her, he only wants sex. Tate wants a relationship with him, but she goes along with his idea. She wants him to take her to the pilot, if you know what I mean. That only makes sense if you've seen Rocket Man. But that's this whole channel, basically. He gives her two rules. Don't ask him about his past, and never expect a future. They start sleeping together, spending more time together, and this is one of my favorite parts of any of these books. He watches me open the juice, he watches me take a drink of the juice, he watches me put the lid back on the juice, he watches me set the juice on his kitchen counter, but he doesn't watch me closely enough to notice how fast I can lunge for the bag. Miles is kind of messing with Tate the entire time they're hooking up. He acts like he's really into her and wants a relationship, but doesn't actually commit. Even when they're having sex, he doesn't make eye contact with her and he leaves as soon as he's finished. A lot of these sex scenes are really sad, in my opinion, and she's still making excuses for him. He's obviously clueless when it comes to how a guy should treat a girl, which surprises me because I get these vibes from him that he's really a decent guy. If any other man treated me like he did, it would be the one and only time. However, I find myself continuing to make excuses for him.
Stop defending me!
And worst of all, at one point they have sex in a car and Tate is still in her scrubs. For some reason, Colleen Hoover really likes the idea of having sex in scrubs, which I think is so gross. I wouldn't even mention it if it didn't happen multiple times in multiple books. In It Ends With Us, Lily was super into Ryle in scrubs, and she even let him lay in her bed with scrubs on after a 48-hour shift at the hospital. I am not a surgeon, I am not a nurse, but I do have a job that requires me to wear scrubs. And the reason I'm required to wear scrubs is because I'm doing gross stuff. I'm drawing blood, I'm collecting urine samples, I'm giving people shots, I'm getting sneezed on and coughed on. Have you ever noticed how I'm apologizing for being sick all the time on this channel? In my last video, I had pneumonia, and now in this video, I have the flu. Anyways, they keep seeing each other, Corbin catches them together, and he asks if Miles loves Tate. I'm positive the slow shake of his head pleases neither of us. Are you at least planning to? Corbin asks. No, he whispers. He's not even planning to love me. They get into a fight about their relationship status and the way Miles has been treating her. Tate brings up Rachel and asks what she did to make Miles this way, and he starts crying again. Instead of communicating his emotions in a normal, healthy way, they have sex on the floor. It hurts. Give me your pain, Miles. And while they're having sex, Miles calls Tate Rachel, which pushes her to finally end things between them. You may be wondering who Rachel is and what happened between her and Miles. What I haven't told you is that half of this book is from Tate's POV and the other half is from Miles. They alternate chapters. I wanted to save Miles's chapters until now because this is how we find out why Miles is so cold and distant and unwilling to commit to a relationship. And the reason why is that 6 years ago, he fell in love with his stepsister. They first meet when Miles is tasked with showing the new girl at school the way to Mr. Clayton's classroom. This new girl is Rachel, and Miles is instantly obsessed with her. I say obsessed rather than in love because the way he talks about her is unhinged. It's so possessive and creepy. I open the door for her and let Mr. Clayton know that Rachel is new here. I also want to add, for the sake of all the other guys in the classroom, that Rachel is not theirs. She's mine. I discreetly take a picture of her from where I'm seated. I send the picture in a message to Ian that says, "She's gonna have all my babies." Ew! Miles's father tells him that he's been dating a woman named Lisa for a while now. When Lisa comes over for dinner, she brings her daughter, Rachel. Miles and Rachel decide that they don't care their parents are dating and have been for months. They met 4 days ago and they know it's true love. They decide to start dating too and to keep it a secret from their parents. Obviously. Technically, by every metric, this is not incest. They weren't raised as siblings, they didn't even know their parents were dating, but like, it's still weird, right? Like there was no reason for them to be written as step-siblings. Colleen Hoover dedicated this book to her sisters. If I were them, I'd be like, is she trying to tell me something? And even though Miles and Rachel's relationship has been much shorter and more immature than their parents' relationship, the narrative is 1000% on their side. Their romance is treated with much more significance, and Miles and Rachel are portrayed as completely in the right. Just like Miles did with Tate, Rachel establishes some ground rules. No making out when their parents are home, no sex, and no sneaking around at night. After about a month, their parents leave for the weekend, and Miles and Rachel break rule number 2 and have sex. They go to the beach, and I have to point out the amount of repetition in this book, especially in the Miles chapters. Rachel is happy. I make Rachel happy. I make Rachel's life better. Her life is better with me in it. And then, like 2 minutes later, my words don't make Rachel smile. My words make Rachel frown. My words make Rachel cry. Miles, I'm late. She's pregnant with her stepbrother's baby. I hate to bring this up every time a character gets pregnant, which is often in these books, but Rachel and Miles automatically accept that they're having this baby. They're still teenagers, they have no idea what their future looks like, their parents don't even know about their relationship, but they never consider any other option. Miles and Rachel decide to tell their parents, but before they can, they announce that they're already married. Miles and Rachel are officially step-siblings. They tell their parents Rachel is pregnant. My father stands. He's angry now. Who's responsible? He yells. He looks at me. Tell me who he is, Miles. What kind of guy knocks a girl up and doesn't have the balls to be with her when she tells her own mother? What kind of guy would let a girl's brother be the one to break the news? They're able to mostly work things out, and they move out of their parents' place. Rachel has a boy, and Miles decides to name him Clayton. I know I was hating on some of these names, but I actually do think naming a baby after the teacher whose class you met in is pretty cute. They talk about his circumcision for a long time. After bringing him home from the hospital, Miles is in the car with Rachel and Clayton, and here it is, quite possibly the most infamous passage in Colleen Hoover's entire body of work. "Thank you for this baby," she says from the back seat. "He's beautiful." I laugh. "You're responsible for the beautiful part, Rachel. The only thing he got from me was his balls." She laughs. She laughs hard. "Oh my God, I know," she says. "They're so big." We both laugh at our son's big balls. And immediately after that, they crash their car into a lake and their baby drowns. Yeah, hopefully you feel even a fraction of the whiplash I felt while reading this book. I would like to draw your attention to the cover of this book and how bonkers bananas it is. Ugly Love has water on the cover because the protagonist's infant son drowned. Miles tries to save both Rachel and Clayton, but he's only able to save Rachel. Rachel blames Miles for saving him over their son, and the grief ends up driving them apart. Their parents end up divorcing as well, and Miles hasn't seen Rachel since. After Ian and Cap encourage Miles to go after Tate and confess his feelings, Miles decides to visit Rachel to get closure. Rachel is doing well. She's married to a guy named Brad, and they have a daughter. Rachel tells him it's okay to move on and find love again, so he leaves to go find Tate. He finally tells her what happened with Rachel. They kiss, they make up, Tate forgives him. In the final chapter, Miles proposes to Tate, and in the epilogue, surprise, surprise, they have a baby. I disliked this book. I disliked Miles, in particular. I can't decide if I like him more or less than Leeds, which is not a good sign. I really don't understand how Tate even fell in love with Miles. He had zero personality. Their entire relationship was just sex, and he was very manipulative and callous the entire time. And I hated the way the sex scenes were written, especially the one about Miles giving Tate his pain. I've never let a man use my body to heal their pain, but that is perhaps why I have no Valentine. Also, I don't have a stepbrother. Oh yeah, I also didn't like the incest. I know Colleen Hoover did everything she could to make it technically not incest, but I don't think those parameters were necessary in the first place. Miles and Rachel didn't need to be step-siblings. And even if they weren't related, I just don't like reading about teenagers making out and having sex. I also didn't really like how Tate ended up becoming a mother when that's not something she ever wanted. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having kids or wanting to be a mother, but that was never who Tate was. Her focus had always been on her career as a nurse, so to see that get thrown away in the epilogue was really disappointing. But the biggest issue I'm beginning to have with these books is that there are a lot of morally questionable actions in these books that are never really addressed and, in fact, are framed as good. Every single one of these male love interests have had some tragic event happen in their past. These tragedies are used as an excuse for them to be cruel and temperamental, and I'm sorry, but that just doesn't work for me. It can certainly explain their behavior, but I don't think it excuses any of it. In my opinion, this is the worst of the Colleen Hoover books I've read so far. I rate Ugly Love a 3 out of 10.
November 9.
November 9 starts off with Fallon O'Neill, our leading lady, having lunch at a restaurant with her dad, Donovan, who she hates. The date is November 9th, which is a very significant day in Fallon's life. On this day, 2 years ago, Donovan's home was set on fire with Fallon inside, and she almost died. She got 4th-degree burns on a lot of her body, and to this day, her face and body are covered in scars. I kind of thought 4th-degree burns would require like amputation or something, and she would still be recovering 2 years later. But I guess Colleen Hoover knows as much about burns as she does about brain injuries. We don't know exactly how the fire started. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was arson. Maybe Dignan mistook her for J.K. Rowling. We don't know what happened. But Fallon is under the impression that her father accidentally started the fire and then forgot she was in the house. Fallon is extremely self-conscious about her scars. She avoids being seen by people whenever she can. She dresses very modestly to hide the scars on her body, and she covers her face with her hair. She also has never been in a relationship and doesn't want to date anyone. It's not that Fallon isn't interested in a relationship. She wants love, but it's impossible. At least in her mind, because she's so insecure about her appearance. Fallon's at this restaurant with her dad when a random guy she doesn't know sits down next to her and starts pretending to be her boyfriend. "Just go with it," he whispers, and then it hits me. He must be pretending to be my boyfriend as some weird way to stick it to my father. I think I like my new fake boyfriend. I don't think I like meet cutes anymore. This new fake boyfriend of Fallon's is named Benton James Kessler, and just like in Ugly Love, every other chapter is from his perspective. And Ben is the creepiest, freakiest, most devious man I ever saw. I saw the scars for the first time, and just as I noticed them, you darted your eyes to the floor and let your hair cover most of your face. I was so relieved, because I could tell with that one simple movement that you were really insecure. Despite all of that, Fallon and Ben fall in love within 2 hours of knowing each other. They go back to her place, and Ben starts looking through her clothes to pick out an outfit for her to wear to dinner. I grab one of the few long-sleeve dresses I own and pull it off the hanger. "I like this one." "No," he says. "I'm paying for dinner, so I get to choose what to stare at while we eat."
I hate this guy.
I don't like making people uncomfortable, and if I wore something like that, they would feel weird looking at me. "Okay," he says simply, dropping the dress to the floor. but it's your own fault people feel uncomfortable looking at you. To prove his point, Ben forces Fallon to undress and put on a more revealing outfit. The entire time this is happening, Fallon is incredibly uncomfortable. She even starts crying, but she rationalizes his behavior as him just trying to comfort her and make her more confident. A lot of the more sexual scenes in this book are not consensual. Fallon is panicking, she's frozen in place, but she can't bring herself to say no, and we're supposed to think that means she actually wants it. That episode of Gumball I mentioned earlier handles consent better than this book. And it was a season 1 episode, so it wasn't even that good.
Gumball's always there for a friend in need.
I think you're a fat.
Fallon is hesitant to get too close to Ben because her mother says she shouldn't fall in love until she turns 23. My mother says the majority of people have their lives figured out by the age of 23, so I want to make sure I know who I am and what I want out of life before I allow myself to fall in love. That is all the way wrong, but she already has really strong feelings for Ben, for some reason. I'm dizzy. I'm so dizzy. It feels so good. My mother is crazy. Why would a girl care to find herself when she'll never be able to make herself feel as good as a guy can? Ben lives in Los Angeles and Fallon is moving to New York, so they decide to meet once a year, every year, on November 9. They won't give each other their phone numbers or any other contact information, and they won't speak outside of every November 9. And I think that's stupid. This book only takes place on different November 9s. We don't get to see anything that happens between them. But I guess it's an okay concept for a romance novel, which works out well because Ben is a writer and he started writing a book about his relationship with Fallon called November 9. On the next November 9, Fallon meets Ben in LA and they're fooling around in his room when a girl walks in on them. Fallon is mortified and ashamed because she didn't even really want Ben to see her body and now this random girl has seen it too. But Ben thinks this is the funniest shit ever. He explains that the girl is Jordan and she is engaged to his brother Kyle. Is she your sister? She will be in a few days. He also has another brother named Ian, the very same Ian from Ugly Love. Upon meeting Fallon, Ian pulls Ben aside and punches him in the face. Why? We don't know. Yet. The next November 9, Ben is supposed to meet Fallon in New York, but he doesn't make it. I don't even know how to say this gently, but my brother, Kyle, he was in a wreck 2 days ago. He didn't make it, Fallon. As Ben, Ian, and Jordan are grieving, Tate and Miles show up to support them, and so does Fallon. That night, Ben and Fallon have sex for the first time, and Ben promises Fallon he'll move to New York to be with her. But when Fallon has a conversation with Jordan, she finds out that Ben has signed with an agent. She doesn't want to disrupt Ben's writing career, and she realizes Jordan needs his support more than she does, so she changes her mind and leaves for New York. Ben tries to get her to stay, but she tells him to be with his family and finish his book. By the next November 9, Fallon has come to regret that decision, and she moves back to LA to be with Ben. But because of their stupid rules, she didn't reach out and tell him any of this. When she meets with Ben at a restaurant, he has a baby with him, Oliver, Kyle and Jordan's son, who he's been helping Jordan raise. Ben referred to himself and Jordan as a we, and they keep Oliver's baby monitor on at night, which means they share a bedroom? Fallon runs off to the bathroom crying, and Ben is confused by this because the last time they spoke, Fallon told him she didn't want to take their relationship any further. He's never been in love with Jordan and only ever had feelings for Fallon, but he thought that it would be better for Oliver if he started dating his mom. I know this sort of thing happens a lot. Someone will lose their partner and then they get with their partner's sibling, but I still think it's weird in this context because Ben called Jordan his sister. It's like the same flavor of not incest but kind of as Ugly Love. Ben and Fallon have a huge fight in the parking lot of this Texas Roadhouse or wherever they are. Do you want me to stand here and listen to you explain how you didn't mean to fall in love with your dead brother's wife? We can't make it through this if you walk away again. You didn't give me a choice this time, Ben. You showed up in love with someone else. You share another woman's bed. Your lips make promises against skin that isn't mine. What? Fallon drives away, ending their relationship once again. The next November 9, Fallon is out at the club, and who does she run into but Ben? She is drunk, he is sober, and he takes her down a hallway into a secluded area of the club, and they start making out. I mentioned the questionable sex scenes earlier, but this is easily the worst one. Fallon says no multiple times and tells Ben to stop, but he persists until he wears her down. Apparently, Colleen Hoover later removed this section from the book, but it was in the version I had. Ben and Fallon are reunited and dating again, but not for long because Fallon finds Ben's manuscript, which he has not allowed her to read, and decides to take a peek. At this point, you may be wondering if we ever find out who set the fire. And we do. Are you ready for this? Are you sitting down? Because bitch, it was Ben! Let me explain what happened because Ben wrote it all out in his manuscript. When Ben was 16, his mother committed suicide, and Ben, being a complete moron, didn't bother reading his own mother's suicide note. If he had, he would have learned that his mother had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and wanted to end her life on her own terms. But Ben assumes she must have killed herself over a guy, specifically her boyfriend, Donovan O'Neill. He blames Donovan for his mother's death, so he drives to his house and sets his car on fire, which then leads to the house catching fire, nearly killing Fallon, who was inside the house. And 2 years later, he spotted Donovan leaving flowers at his mother's grave, and he follows him to the restaurant where he sees Fallon, circling back to the beginning of the book. With all this in mind, of course Ian punched Ben in the face when he found out he was dating Fallon and keeping his past a secret from her. I cannot understand how I, as the reader, am supposed to like Ben and be rooting for his and Fallon's relationship. He is the exact opposite of what a love interest should be. In my mind, the perfect man is Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec. He's cute, smart, supportive, and that Ben would never set my house on fire. He set our house on fire! And I don't want to see anyone in the comments like, he didn't mean to set the house on fire, only the car. I don't care that he didn't actually mean to hurt anyone. That's still arson. You should not be with a man who sets things on fire when he's upset. And I know his mom had just died, but you know what? Lots of people's moms die and they don't commit arson. And not only that, when he saw Fallon in the restaurant, his only thought was to sexualize her scars. He knew he was the one responsible for those scars, which she was extremely insecure about, and he deliberately kept that from her. And it's not like he was even a good boyfriend. He was a total asshole the entire time. He told her it was her fault people feel uncomfortable looking at her. He assaulted her. He's so awful. I hate this man. And Fallon forgives him. In fact, she apologizes to him. You can't ask for my forgiveness because there's nothing to forgive. If anything, I'm here for your forgiveness. They get back together forever and ever. Fallon does not get pregnant, shocker, and that's it. That's November 9. I'm starting to think these books aren't for me. From what I can see, Colleen Hoover seems to have a real bias towards her male characters. A more minor example from this book is the way Ben's career was prioritized over Fallon's. Fallon was an actress before the fire and wanted to pursue a career on Broadway at the beginning of the book, but it's never mentioned after that, so I didn't mention it either. I hated Ben. I truly hated him. I thought he was a terrible love interest, a terrible character, and a terrible person. I cannot believe that Colleen Hoover thought it was a good idea for Fallon to forgive Ben for everything he did. And there was so much shit I didn't cover because I was just tired of his antics. I know I said this about Verity too, but how much better would November 9 have been if it were a straight up thriller? Imagine if the reveal was saved for the very end and Fallon falls deeper and deeper in love with Ben, only to find out that not only was he not who he said he was, but he was responsible for the fire that nearly killed her. I feel like Hoover is normalizing a lot of really fucked up behavior by having her female characters constantly normalize and make excuses for the male characters. November 9, in my opinion, represents everything wrong with Colleen Hoover's writing. I found it to be cringy, badly written, and sexist. The characters were flat, the plot was thin, and the book romanticizes some truly reprehensible behavior like arson, abuse, and sexual assault. November 9 might be one of the worst books I've ever read in my entire life. I can't remember the last time I disliked a book this much. Actually, yes, I can, but that video won't be out until May. This book single-handedly ruined the month of November for me, which is my favorite month. It's the only month with a Gorillaz song, a Tyler the Creator song, and a Moomin book named after it. And it's my birth month. I rate November 9 a 2 out of 10.
It ends with us.
I'm not going to give you a recap of this film because it is a pretty faithful adaptation. Honestly, I'm less interested in talking about the film itself and more about the circumstances surrounding it. This is not at all going to be a deep dive or anything like that. I just think this film ties into the rest of Hoover's work in a really interesting way. It Ends With Us, the film, has generated a huge amount of various controversies in a way that almost reminds me of Don't Worry, Darling. At first, the criticisms of the film were similar to that of the book. Blake Lively, who played Lily and also produced the film, was accused of being tone deaf during the film's press tour and using a serious movie about domestic abuse to promote her hair care line and her brand of alcohol. And yes, promoting alcohol in particular alongside a film like this is insanely out of touch. She also infamously encouraged women to wear florals when they went to see the film, much like how women wore pink to go see Barbie. Lively clearly wanted to create a Barbenheimer-type moment, but she missed the mark in two major areas, in my opinion. Firstly, Barbenheimer was authentic. Margot Robbie didn't tell anyone to wear pink, we all just did it because it was fun. Also, she was trying to create this moment because It Ends With Us was released at around the same time as Deadpool and Wolverine, which starred her husband, Ryan Reynolds, as well as Hugh Jackman of Eddie the Eagle fame. Oh, right, he was also in all those X-Men movies. Wait, weren't those directed by— The whole reason Barbenheimer even started was because Barbie and Oppenheimer were released on the exact same day. That wasn't the case with Deadpool and It Ends With Us, so it already feels disingenuous. But Lively was also trying to make It Ends With Us be Barbie, when she should have been trying to make it be Oppenheimer. Deadpool and Wolverine was the silly, fun movie for the boys, and It Ends With Us was the serious movie for the girls, but she just didn't see it that way. After this press tour, a lot of people started piling on Lively and bringing up stuff from the past, like how she and Reynolds got married on a plantation, which I do see an issue with. There's no way you could get married on a plantation without knowing that history, and I don't know if that history is something you should be willing to overlook. But I also think, personally, a lot of people just thought Blake Lively was annoying, and now her actions were justifying their opinion of her. And I can admit, I was one of those people. Much like the promotion of the book it was based on, the promotion of the film largely undersold the domestic violence aspects of the story and marketed it as a romance, which a lot of people understandably took issue with. I think it's just wild that the team behind the film made the same mistake again. There were also rumors of a conflict between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, who directed the film and played Ryle. Baldoni was insistent on discussing the movie as a portrayal of abuse, not a lighthearted romance, and he was noticeably distant from Lively during the press tour. It was almost like there were two different films being promoted. Like, just look at the difference between these two posters. It almost reminds me of the differing book covers for the book Lolita. The movie comes out, it does pretty well, everyone was surprised that the movie's soundtrack was good, but there are a lot of bad movies with great soundtracks. Public sentiment was not in favor of Blake Lively after the film's release, but in December, she sued Justin Baldoni for sexual harassment, where she alleged some wildly inappropriate and unacceptable behavior from Baldoni. Justin Baldoni then sued both Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds for defamation and extortion. There are a lot more details to this situation that I'm not going to cover in this video. I would definitely recommend that you look into it on your own and form your own opinion. The situation is still developing and there's a lot of nuance to it, so I don't want to make any definitive statements about who is right or wrong. But outside of all the drama surrounding the movie itself, a lot of people started re-examining Colleen Hoover's work and the flaws within it. So to finally wrap up this video, let's re-examine Colleen Hoover's work and the flaws within it. So now that I've read 5 Colleen Hoover books, I don't think I know any more about love than I did when I started. I do understand why her books are as popular as they are, but I also understand why they're so controversial. Would I recommend any of these books? No. I don't want to shame anyone who reads Colleen Hoover. If you enjoy these books, it's okay. I want to know why though. Having read her books, I noticed a lot of bad writing, misogynistic undertones, and glorification of abuse. In that sense, it's really interesting that It Ends With Us is Hoover's most popular book. We are meant to understand that It Ends With Us is about abuse and that Ryle is abusive. But the only difference between Ryle and every other love interest Hoover writes is that Ryle is physically abusive. Every male lead she writes is cruel, manipulative, and in some cases dangerous. And in my opinion, outside of their names and jobs, every single one of the female leads are completely interchangeable, hence the casting. They have no hobbies or interests outside of the man they're obsessed with, and in most cases, they put up with his terrible behavior and end up having his child, even though they never expressed any desire to be a mother. Honestly, I think the basic bare-bones concepts of these books are genuinely good. Except for Ugly Love and November 9th, there was no saving them, but I just have a lot of problems with the way Hoover presents her ideas. It seems like she likes to write about darker and taboo topics, but she doesn't know how to do it in a respectful way. I don't know if she's aware of the more problematic elements of her books, and I don't know if she cares. Why would she? Her books sell like crazy. Here's my final ranking of every single one of the books I read, from best to worst. I would love to know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, and if you disagree or agree with any of my takes. And if you're a fan of Colleen Hoover, you're probably not watching this video, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Is there something I'm missing? I also had like a crazy fever when I read most of these books, so maybe just disregard this entire video. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of this very long video. If you liked it, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you liked me, be sure to subscribe to my channel. If you want, you can even turn notifications on so you'll be the first to know the next time I'm looking for love in all the wrong places. Anyways, that's gonna be all from me. I've gotta go buy myself some roses. There's a new flower shop down the street that does steampunk bouquets. Bye!
Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. This video took a really long time. Like